So you get kind of miracles that take place when people see a common interest rises above their other kinds of political differences. And this happens at the ethical and spiritual level, and it happens at the practical level as well. So a lot of our work in the UN has been to build those kinds of bridges of unity and understanding to work together in solving common problems. And often it's by taking it to the ethical and moral level, and people need to become moral leaders, that you can help to take those processes forward. Well, I think probably the biggest challenge, as I understand in this perspective, is that we've designed an economic system that is cut off from these reflections. If you look at the limited liability corporation, you can buy stock, you invest your money in it, and you're not responsible for what it does, how it makes its money. Adam Smith would be shocked. The invisible hand of self-interest in his mind was combined with a sense of moral responsibility that would, in a sense, balance that question of self-interest. He wrote books in moral philosophy and so on. The idea that you could separate, the economic dimension from the ethical and moral dimension would have been totally, it was just unknown to him. They didn't even think in those terms that would be possible. And yet we've created, over the years, and there are books now that are sort of underlying how we've drifted away so far from the normal checks and balances of the human conscience and created structures that don't consider that at all. And even when you have individual business leaders who try to be ethical and moral, they're trapped in the system, which gives them very little room for maneuver. And that allows the system to go on doing all of these things that are, not ignoring the long term, ignoring the impact, and allowing poverty to develop, exploiting the poor, and so on, do all sorts of things that would seem quite unethical and shocking, and yet it's legal, it's possible. It's perfectly possible. You set up, your headquarters in some tax-free haven and transfer pricing so you pay no taxes, in the wealthy countries, and you make all your money where there are no taxes. And yes, it's perfectly legal, but taxes are the way you achieve some kind of social justice. And there's no global taxes. So in a globalized system, most wealthy countries escaped from those mechanisms that we consider civilized that allow, taking care of the poor and so on. So all governments are going bankrupt and the companies are getting richer and richer because they've escaped from the traditional, and yet we're trapped in national sovereignty. They're not taking those issues to the global level. So we've created structural problems that have allowed these moral issues to get out of hand. And that's why you need moral education and moral leadership to say, how do we bring it back into the system? And at some point we have to say, we have to also go legally beyond the simple corporate charter that respond to the shareholders and nothing else. That's somebody else's responsibility, and say these institutions that are so powerful, more powerful than the governments today, can no longer ignore the responsibility. And we talk about corporate social responsibility, but it's still, often it's just public relations, it's greenwashing or something like that. It's not really serious. And because you can organize globally to not look at these issues, you escape from them, and you say, we've got good accountants and good lawyers that sort out for us. We're not breaking any laws. But the result, if you look at it sort of from an ethical perspective, it's totally unethical. There are two ways to bring justice into society. Either you have laws and police and courts, and you arrest people who break the law, and you fine them and you send them to jail and so on. That's very expensive. If you educate them to have a conscience and moral principles, and these things are wrong, and therefore they have good behavior, it's so much more cost effective. And the more you can invest in education to lay a foundation of ethical, moral, behavior for equity and justice, the less you need both the legal system or the heavy bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is created because you can't trust people to do things right and to make regulations and procedures and forms and so on, and you get layer upon layer of bureaucracy to correct for this problem or that problem and so on. And ultimately it's self-destructive to the system. And it's so much easier to do it through education if we want to invest in that. And of course, that means not just waiting until they're in graduate school of business, but starting with the children and the young people, and when they're forming their values in their pre-adolescent years and early adolescent years, That's when you need to be laying this foundation of ethics and values and moral principles, which then carries them on through their life. And they can live differently from the society of today, which has forgotten all of that and is going rapidly in the other direction. The most hopeful thing I've been feeling recently is I have found a way of solving the climate change problem. I found something that might be able to save us from catastrophic climate change. A financial collapse. The only thing that could slam the brakes on the global system in time to stop not burning all the oil and all the coal and all the shale gas and everything else would be a collapse of the financial system that would put the brakes on the world economy and stop a lot of the excess use of energy until we can make a better transition to alternative systems. So, where it's not, you say, there's no hope at all, there's no way we can stop the system, there are ways the system might, in fact, stop itself. Because, a debt-driven economy in a world where the growth rate is never going to be higher than the interest rate again, simply because the things that allowed for growth were the cheap fossil fuel subsidy, discovery of new resources, population growth, technological innovation, they're all coming to an end for various reasons. Fossil fuels, we've got the easy half, it's getting more and more expensive to exploit the rest, demand is growing, supply is reducing, price is going to go up. Research discovery, we've already explored most of the world, there's not much left to discover around the planet today. Population growth, we've got aging populations in much of the world. By 2050, they expect the population to stabilize and start declining, so that's ending as well. Technological innovation, there are issues of costs and benefits. Each new level of increment of technological innovation produces more, it costs more for less and less benefit. And finally, the diminishing returns. The first generation of iPhone, second generation of iPhone, fifth generation, sixth generation, they're struggling to do something new and different. And in each year of technology, there's a point at which there may be some new discoveries in some areas, but you can't keep going on forever. Everything needs to be done in moderation. Technology to access the greatest source of evil would be good if we kept it at some limited level. Learning moderation, learning that growth can't go on forever, there's an optimal size for everything. This is a change in paradigm. The economists aren't ready for it, in general. By and large, they're still trapped in an old paradigm and don't see any alternative. How do we find the design criteria for alternative economic paradigms? It's something that is looking at a social vision of society that is altruistic and cooperative, that creates employment for everyone and eliminates poverty in the world. Those are what the economy should be doing. And those are, you might say, the ethical design principles for an alternative economic system. Not that we don't need an economy, not that we don't need a market system, but in a market that's based on competition, which often means hiding information about what you're selling a used car. Do you tell you what it really has, or do you lie about it to sell it better? And yet the market is based on perfect information. The theory of the market is based on perfect information for buyer and seller. It would work much better with consultation, with an honest sharing, between trustworthy people. How much did it cost you? What is your need? What is the just price between us? That would be much more effective, ethically and economically, than the kind of systems that we have. So it's not that the mechanisms are wrong, it's the values and ethics that are behind them that need to change. And it would allow us to create a much better and more efficient economic system for the future.